Well, it's a long way back across that great vast Atlantic, and before you did go, oh, I promised you that I'd hold you and beg you not to do so, but I let you go. Set your sails up and prayed the winds to blow. I like to pretend that I'm a merciful siren. Look out for the rock that I'm singing Well, I'll mend your ship the very day that you wreck it, though it may take some time. Oh, to get to know this old shipwright, then I will bid thee good fortune, and I will bid thee farewell, farewell. I'll leave a ghost at the helm to guide you through the realm. For here there be monsters. I don't deny that I'm worth.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Neil. Hi, Chelsea.
Jason.
Hey, Jason.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone to the spring 2023 virtual VINsider pickup party. This is now what, 4 or 5 of these that we've done. One of the good ideas that we had during COVID that we decided really was worthy of living past the acute pandemic. So thank you for joining us wherever you're joining us from. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jason Haas, partner and general manager out here. I would love, Neil and Chelsea, I'd love the two of you to introduce yourselves for the handful of people who might not know you yet.
Neil, go for it.
Yeah, I'm Neil Collins. Those of you who don't know me, I've been the winemaker and vineyard manager here for quite a number of years, since close to the very beginning.
And my name is Chelsea Franchi, and I've worked with Neil in the cellar for 15 years.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
the two of you have a combined, 40 years making Tablas Creek,
Yeah.
which seems kind of impossible, but it's amazing.
It does seem impossible, but there it is.
Cool. So for those of you who have not been a part of one of these, this is kind of it's of a format that we've done a few times. I know that some of you will be working with the kits of wines that we put together through Master of the World. Chelsea, do you have your kit?
I have some here. They're so cool.
These are little 187 ml bottles that we did through Master of the World, which is a a cool company up in Northern California that was founded by a master som to try to give people who are in the part of like master som training or master of wine training the opportunity to taste smaller than full bottle lots and blind taste. And it turns out to have been a very useful thing to be able to do during COVID. And they expanded to doing trade tastings for wineries, consumer tastings like this. And we've now worked with them for, I think this is our 4th time working with them to do these little kits. Do realize that they are a quarter of a bottle each. So if you are by yourself and you finish all 6 of those bottles, that's a bottle and a half of wine. And even if you're sharing them with another person, just be aware they look small and cute, but there's a couple of glasses in each one.
Take it easy, Chelsea.
It's Friday night. Please don't judge.
I wondered why you wanted to go home to do this.
So Chelsea is joining us from home. Neil, I'm outside the winery, out on our brisk patio on this cool spring evening, and Neil is inside in kind of our main studio that we do a lot of our virtual tastings and stuff from. I know that a lot of you are joining but did not get the tasting kits. Typically, only about half the people who join this event have the tasting kits. So if you are opening a bottle from your shipment, if you're just opening something from the cellar, that's great. There's no wrong way to do this. So we're just excited to have you with us for the next little bit. Please do ask any questions that you have. You probably have seen some of the questions pop up. We have Ian Consoli, our director of marketing at the switchboard here. So he is going to be pulling questions on screen for us to answer. So please do. A lot of the most interesting places that we always get to in these tastings come from the questions that we get from all of you. So don't be shy. We will be interspersing information about the wines in the shipment with kind of more general updates about what's going on at the winery and in the vineyard. So we don't want to do all that up front and make you wait to taste the first wine. So if you would pour yourself a glass of something, if you are going to be doing it in order, we're going to start with the Tablas Blanc from 2021. And I think we should probably start by talking about the first wine and then dive into what's going on at the winery. So it's fairly poignant tasting the Tablas Blanc right now, right after we have finished a week where we did the blending of the 2022 whites and made the painful decision not to make a 22 Tablas Blanc because the vintage was so scarce. But this is a wine that I really love. It's always one of the ones that I find that I reach for a lot when I'm at home. Neil, do you want to talk about how we think of this wine at Tablas Creek, where it fits into our hierarchy and what its idea is?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we started, the intention was to make one wine or 2 wines, one red, one white, which became the Esprit. And as we evolved, we realized that there was a need for a second wine in our lineup, which became ultimately the Cotes de Tablas. And I think the first vintage was 1999, which was originally Petit Cuvée, but then evolved into Cotes, if I'm not mistaken. And always based in Viognier, whereas the Esprit is always based in Roussanne. So Viognier, everything is generally, or a lot of stuff is stainless steel, a lot brighter. Viognier being the lead in this wine, and I think it shows pretty powerfully in the 21. Viognier is pretty dominant to me. I get the Marsanne too, interesting, which 14%, but Marsanne always kind of surprises me with it's such a mellow, low key grape by itself, but it does show itself in these blends pretty well generally. So really the way I see it is it's fresh and bright and ready to go right out of the gate once we get it in bottle. Whereas, I think with a lot of our white wines in our beginnings, we didn't really think that they were necessarily going to age a long time. Of course, we knew the ageability of Roussanne, so we hoped that the Esprit would. But I mean, testament being, we opened an 03 Vermentino this week, which was tasting phenomenal, which I don't think anyone in this company would have thought that, when we planted that grape. And that was pretty exciting, I thought. So though we always say, it's ready to drink now, we make it to drink soon and relatively quickly, I think we're finding that it ages really quite nicely over time.
Absolutely. So Chelsea, when you taste this wine, what flavors and aromas, what do you get out of the 21 Cote Blanc?
This 21 vintage, I think, typically with Viognier, you do get a lot of the stone fruit characteristics. And to me, this has some kind of harder edges to it. And I mean that in the best possible way. So instead of getting nectarine, it is kind of that nectarine pit. Like it has a lot of minerality. It has a lot of like really cool earthy elements to it, like mintiness and kind of that bright like lemongrass character. A lot of these things do have this kind of green bite to them, which I think makes this an incredibly versatile Cote de Tablas. We always, for me at least, I always think of the Cote as being probably one of the friendliest wines that we make. And this one I think has more to it than just friendliness. It's got some complexity, it's got some depth, it's got, the beautiful fruit, the floral character, it's got the green element, it's got the minerality, it's got a little bit that kind of that sea spray. So it's, I don't know, I can't imagine anything more that I would want in this.
Would Tannat be the most unfriendly wine that we make, do you think?
I would say either Le Conflise or not. I have ideas.
We're in this sort of this moment where there's going to be 3 different vintages that we're going to be tasting this evening. There's going to be some of our late release reds from 2020. There's this Cote de Tablas Blanc and the Patelin de Tablas Red from 2021. And then we're going to get to taste the first of our 22s. And I have a plan to have us talk about 22. But how would you describe 21? I think of it as being a vintage where it was kind of one of the classics for us. Everything is like itself, but more so. But I'd love to hear from either or both of you how you think of 21.
I remember the 2021 vintage as being metered and very balanced as far as when the fruit came in. The weather itself gave us this very balanced feel to the harvest. And then when we brought the fruit in, all of the numbers were just pretty much right where we would want them. Like if you could write a textbook on Rhone varieties and Pasteurables, this is exactly what we would want. And that's what we were given. It was a fantastic vintage. And I think the wines that we're seeing out of that they speak to balance and poise. I think they're really mirroring the vintage that we experienced.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's particularly in this wine, I think there's a decent amount of opulence in this wine, but that is brought into check and balanced by beautiful acidity but there's a richness and a depth to this wine in particular that I think is beautiful. And it's hard to bring all the whites into one package when you're talking about a vintage, when you're thinking of Picpoul and Roussanne, very different things. But I think varietally, they're all very strongly, as either Chelsea or Jason said, very strongly varietally correct in this vintage, if quite round for me.
That's a great question from Daniel asking if we're inspired by wines from other wine growers or wine regions.
Absolutely.
The short answer is yes, we are absolutely inspired by wines from other growers and regions. But I'm not sure that this wine in particular has a particularly great comp in an old world region. Because if you think of a place like Condrieu, it's going to be 100% Viognier. Whereas this is kind of a Viognier-driven white Rhone blend with a mix of grapes that are more northern Rhone grapes and southern Rhone grapes. So sort of something that I think maybe came out of what we found here in Pasteurables more than it does, at least more directly than it does from any specific model in the old world.
Well, I would agree with that, but I would also say that as we approach making the Viognier itself pre-blending, definitely the Condrieu is in our mind more than any other Viognier making region. I mean, we definitely try to lean towards picking it early and keeping some of those greener, I think Chelsea said bitey characters. I think we definitely lean towards that minerality and when we make the Viognier. Of course, when it comes into the blend, it becomes the Cote. But as we make each wine, I mean, it's totally inspired by different regions and equally by different winemakers and wineries, that we're seeing doing things and enjoying their experiments, whether it be fermentation style or aging vessels, for sure. I mean, constantly tasting and trying and watching what other people are doing, for sure.
In terms of, there's a winemaking question, kind of follow-up question that Daniel asked about whether there's any new oak on the Cote de Tablas Blanc. Chelsea, you want to take this one?
There's no new oak. There is some oak on the coat. We do age some of the smaller lots in barrique prior to blending, and then post blending it will go into some barrel. But it's for the Cote de Tablas, I would say it's pretty much 100% neutral.
What percentage would you say of this was stainless steel versus neutral wood?
I would
There's
say
some concrete involved too, though, right? The egg was involved in the Viognier, if I'm not mistaken.
for Viognier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a little concrete as well as stainless and wood, and an oval also. Your memory's better than mine, Chelsea. I'm just.
There is probably
22. We're in an oval.
There's a portion of oval and
Okay.
a portion of foudre. So, yeah, neutral, but yeah, there is some oak. Yeah, but I think the richness, if you're getting richness, it's probably not from new oak. I mean, it could be gleaned from oak aging, but I think it's just the vintage signature. The 2021 vintage just has a little bit more plushness to it.
And 21 was still, we're still in a dry period, which has now come to a crashing end, of course. But so there was a fairly low yield, and I think not massive, not tiny, but that adds to that too. And playing with different vessels is also something that we're always tinkering with in small degrees. I mean, Cote started its life pretty much all in stainless, but we've evolved into the ovals, which when we say oval, I guess people don't really know what we're talking about, right? It's like half the size of a foudre, which is a 1,200 gallon wooden cask. The ovals are about 660. And we've talked about the egg, but we're going to go to the great egg disaster, which I'll let Chelsea tell that story one time.
Something else that I think is worth noting, if you look, I'm going to hold this right up to the camera, the weight and richness of this wine is not from alcohol. It's 12.5% alcohol in this wine. And that's one of the things that I really love about 2021 is that it has a ton of richness and texture without being alcoholic. It's one of my absolute favorite vintages in our recent history. In our last decade, it's probably my favorite.
There you go.
Okay, there was a good question about food pairings with this. Steve asks, does one drink this with Thai food? Yes, one absolutely does drink this with Thai food. I think Viognier is actually a great pairing for Thai food. What else? What are your favorite things to have this with?
I love this wine with summer salads because this to me screams summertime. I mean, with that juicy Viognier lead, this is, like grilled peaches on a bed of arugula. I think if you can bring out some of those citrusy stone fruit characteristics, this is just such a beautiful, beautiful pairing with that. It's summertime to me.
Yeah, I mean, hard to do better than those suggestions, really. I mean, sea bass would be a great fish pairing with this because a little bit of the fat from the sea bass would play really well with this wine. Simple.
I love the idea of that kind of like fresh take on seafood as a pairing with the Cote Blanc. Probably my favorite pairing that I've done with this was a dinner where they did mussels mariniere, just like that classic garlic white wine, a little bit of fennel, kind of slightly licoricey sweetness, and then the richness of the mussels paired with the Cote Blanc is like, that's my like flavor memory of what was just outstanding. But it's a pretty flexible wine with food. I think it's one of the reasons that I know a lot of us here reach for it as often as we do.
I think you get a bit of that with the blends. You know, there's so much going on there. They become more versatile than the singles to me.
Yep. This is probably a good segue into the food pairing piece. I see Chef Jeff Scott. The reason I keep looking off towards the building is that I'm sitting right outside our kitchen, so I get to see Jeff as he's plating stuff up.
Yes.
So I'm going to
here. Yeah.
excellent. I'm going to show you all these arancini risotto balls. And
This is Jeffrey's favorite moment.
and I think it's Jeff's going to sit down to actually talk about the dish, because just looking at as we were preparing and getting the menus published, I was looking at this one and saying, oh, I want that right now, and I want it with that wine. So Jeff, welcome.
Hi, Jeffrey.
I'm right here.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Please.
I can't hear you, but I'm happy to talk.
We can hear you, so go for it.
Okay, I'm going to go for it. And so we thought long and hard about what we were going to do this spring, and we decided to do arancini. And arancini is basically the greatest use of leftover risotto, and we are so happy to bring it to you. We used it with rock shrimp, and Pacific rock shrimp is fantastic, super sweet, already kind of diced up when you get it. And also, when you fold it into the risotto, it is not in any way at all uncookable. So you just fold it in and it is ready to go. Did you get me?
Yep, heard you loud and clear.
And so one of my favorite things about this dish is that let's cook a risotto. Let's start with a lemon risotto. Let's start with a chicken stock and garlic and fantastic shallot, fantastic onion, and then go on to let it reduce as we would cook a risotto, and then bring in flavors that are interesting flavors that are bringing in possibly the rock shrimp, possibly other seafood flavors. Did you get me now? Possibly, yeah.
Can you hear us, Jeff?
I can hear you. Yeah.
That's good.
No, I'll be good enough. So reducing down to risotto, bringing in rock shrimp at the end of it. And I think that a lot of people have said to me as I've started this recipe, what is going on with rock shrimp? Why don't we saute it first? We don't saute it first. It is a delicate creature that just gets folded in at the end. And then as we fold it in the end, we put it into a sheet pan, and then we make our arancini with it. And the arancini is made after the risotto is made. So the idea of arancini is the risotto that's not made, the risotto that is going to be made tomorrow. And that's why we see that. So off we go. We start to form the balls of it with a little bit of egg, a little bit of any type of egg wash or breadcrumb that you'd like. And then we fold it and fry it. And I think it's a fantastic dish, and super, super excited to bring it to you guys today. We're serving it with a little bit of yuzu cream, a little bit of basil aioli, and it should be a little bit spicy, but also really nice with the fresh white wines of the season right now. Jason, what do you think of the pairing with the wines and the arancini?
I think it's delicious. I love the way that each sort of makes the other one taste even more like itself. Like sometimes I think people choose a flavor in a dish and a flavor in a wine because they're similar, and that then they work seamlessly together. There's other times where they create a contrast with each other and make the opposite. Like the food makes the wine taste more like the wine wanted to be, and the wine makes the food taste more like the food seems like it wanted to be. And this, for me, is that kind of a pairing. It's the
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that, often this a fried pairing or a crispy pairing is not great with the wines. And so it takes a little bit of a risk. But I think in this spring pairing portfolio, it is really, really nice to have a little bit of crisp to it and a little bit of spice to it. And to do something a little bit risky as we're doing right now. I mean, for so many years, we've worked with the spring wine pairings and the food pairings. And this, for me, is a little bit outside of the box, but I kind of like it a lot because there's two things about it. Not only is it crispy, but it's all grandma style. And that's kind of fun to do. Both of those are fun to do. Yeah.
do you have an alternate? If people don't know how to find rock shrimp, do you have a substitute for them?
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. So the Argentinian red shrimp are a fantastic pairing that you can find in your Trader Joe's market, or any shrimp that you can find in your market. Take the shell off and do it. I like the rock shrimp because of the sweetness of it. Rock shrimp is a Pacific thing. It's kind of a Baja thing, and it's really nice to have. But yes, you're absolutely correct. Doesn't happen everywhere. So people are like, how do I do rock shrimp? Just chop up some fresh shrimp and go from there. But I think what's most important to understand is that the shrimp has to be fresh. The shrimp has to be shell on. So we have to achieve that sweetness to it that we don't see in regular shrimp. So you can go ahead and defrost shrimp and chop it up, but it's not going to be quite the same. You have to do the same thing with rock shrimp that you would do with other shrimp. Is my opinion, quite honestly.
Should definitely be on your spring lunch menu, Jeffrey, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to. The reason I did rock shrimp is because of the sweetness and because it's coming into season this spring. And so we're looking at all the water that we've taken in and all of the excitement that we have in this season right now. So we're looking at April, right? And when we're looking at April, we're looking at fishermen going out and getting things that we're not usually getting every year. And so rock shrimp is one of them.
Outstanding. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
We'll see you in a little bit for the red pairing. Meanwhile, if anybody has questions about the recipes or anything, lob them into the chat and we'll make sure that we get Jeff to answer them when he's on in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the kitchen with you. Okay, so as I said, we're going to be going kind of back and forth between talking about the wines and trying to give you a little feel for what's been going on here. And you're probably noticing over my shoulder that it's bright and sunny. That's a little bit deceptive. That is not really what it's been like recently. When we were sitting around the blending table yesterday, there was a point where the sun came out and I was like, I think this is the first time I've seen the sun in a week. It has been very wet. We are at almost 50 inches of rain for the winter. We broke our record for our wettest winter ever a week ago, and we've got another storm coming on Tuesday, and another one looks like it's coming maybe the weekend after that. So, Neil, you've been here longer than any of us. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Well, no, we've broken records not only at Tablas Creek, but I think Paso Robles itself is the wettest year, at least since '58, as I read somewhere. So no, I have not. But just the amount of water coming out of the hillsides is remarkable. I mean, I've literally been driving Adelaide Road or Vineyard Drive since the early 90s. So I'm used to seeing the hillsides around, and I'm used to some pretty good rain years. But there are streams and creeks and water coming out of the hills that I have never witnessed before, ever. And as I was explaining to you yesterday out in the vineyard, I mean, I'm at a loss at what we're going to do to get out there and do our work, because I was up in an upper block of Roussan yesterday on a wheeled vehicle, and I was sliding around on top of the hill, and I was wondering how on earth I was going to actually get home, because at the bottoms of the hills, it's just mud. And it's to the point where we made the decision reluctantly yesterday that we need to pull the sheep out of the vineyard. I mean, we're getting close to bud break. The mud is so much, they're going to do more harm than good. So it is just amazing. I mean, we sit in our office and look out the window, and Adelaide Road still in the sunshine is just a sheet of water running down the road. I have certainly never ever seen that. I mean, it's incredible. And as we say, I'm never going to complain about rain, but it certainly is nice to see some sunshine. And it's really, really going to be interesting to see what happens, because we're getting late in the year and we haven't really seen massive growth in our cover crops, but it's been so cold and wet that the soil has not had a chance to warm up. I think we're going to have an explosion of growth here coming up once the sun actually does come out. I think June, July, August are going to be just such a challenge to get out there and maintain the vineyard. We always go out about now and start mowing low-lying areas because we're worried about the spring frost, and there's just no way. I mean, firstly, we'd destroy the soil, but I think we'd lose the tractor as well. So I don't think we can do that this year, which we've been cautious in the past, but I really don't remember a year when we just were looking and going, we're just not going to be able to put a tractor in this vineyard maybe until mid-April at this point. It's just crazy and great.
Mid-April is only a couple of weeks away. I mean, that sounds optimistic to me.
Well, if it keeps raining, then there's no way. We're going to be into May, and now we just hope that Mother Nature has been kind to us with giving us the rain, and we appreciate that. Now, if she can just be kind and not throw a frost at us too, that would be great. But she's not known for that.
Ian, do you have some pictures of the conditions? I think we had. Oh, well, so this is a good one. This is
That's
what.
a condition.
Yeah, this is what Adelaide Road looked like in the first week of January. Las Tablas Creek is supposed to be flowing under the road, not over the road. It was flowing over the road for about 24 hours when we'd gotten 20 inches of rain in 3 weeks. Is this I don't know if we have there. I think there's a video also that. So this is. I took this week. You want to see what Neil was talking about with the soils being saturated. This is one of our head train Mourvedre blocks right outside the tasting room, and you can see there's just water everywhere. It's sort of flowing in sheets down the hillsides. This is at the bottom of a hill, so I'm expecting this to be this wet for a long time, another several weeks at least, even if we don't get more rain. So in the grand scheme of things, I mean, the biggest issue that we've had in the vineyard over the last 3 years has been that 3-year drought that started in 2020 and was really punishing by last year. So looking at what things look like now, how green they are, how healthy they look, I mean, it will be a challenge. It'll be a challenge taming the growth of that cover crop when it's still wet out there and we've got canes growing.
It will be a much nicer challenge than the one we would have been facing had it not rained.
Yep. Okay, let's talk about the second wine. The second wine that we've got is our Dianthus. I would show you the bottle, except for I didn't get a bottle because this was poured out of keg from our tasting room, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But let's talk about the wines first. So, Chelsea, you've overseen the rosé program for a long time. Do you want to? What is Dianthus? What when people are thinking about Dianthus, what should they think about?
So the Dianthus, we make 2 rosés at Tablas Creek. The Dianthus is our estate-grown rosé. It's 100% made with Saunier fruit, and Saunier in French is a term that means to bleed. So what we do is we bring the red varieties in and process them as we would if we were making a red wine. The only difference being that 24 to 72 hours later, depending on what kind of color pickup we're seeing, what kind of vintage we're experiencing, what kind of varietal we're working with, we'll bleed that juice off of the tank. So we'll open up the bottom valve into a hopper, and we'll leave most of the wine in there. So we'll only bleed about 20 to 25% maximum from this tank. And what we're given is this beautiful, beautiful, richly colored wine. It has a lot more phenolic character. It has a lot more structure, much more power to it than you would get from a direct press rosé, which is how we make our Patelin. And then the added benefit of a Saignée rosé is that the reds that are left in the tank after you've bled 20 to 25% of the juice off, you have a much more expressive wine because all of a sudden you've changed your ratios of solids to juice. So with this wine, what we're really aiming for is a really powerful rosé that has this delicate balance. So this, I get a lot of that fresh pressed strawberry juice, that beautiful like preserved watermelon rind. Where I think of the Patelin rosé is kind of like a picnic rosé, the Dianthus to me is something significantly more serious. This is something that I want to pair with food. And I love playing with pairings with Dianthus because it does have so much depth and so much interest in this glass. This has been taken over by one of our cellar workers, Amanda Weaver, in the last couple of years. And I am absolutely enamored with what she did with it this year. We drank a lot of this rosé so far.
Is Chelsea, am I right? I think it's the first year we've strayed from the big three and added a little Sanso.
So the Senso, we haven't had for very long. And the Senso, I'm so excited to have Senso for a red variety, but I think I'm most excited to have so-and-so on our property so that we can put it in the Dianthus. Some of my absolute favorite French rosés are Senso rosé or have Senso in them. So the fact that we have this in our blending arsenal now is kind of a dream come true. It was a long time coming.
David asked a question if we've considered planting Tiburon. That is one of the kind of hot rosé grapes. Talking to producers in Provence. It's not at Beaucastel. We are pretty committed to working with the grape varieties that they have at Beaucastel. But Tiburon has been one that I've certainly been looking at with a certain amount of longing. I don't know, Neil, where do you fall on Tiburon?
Would I like to plant Tiburon? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I would love to. I love the rosés made from that grape. But again, we're really focused on Chateauneuf, and it doesn't really fit in that picture. So I think we'll have to scratch that itch by buying great Tiburons from the south of France, which I do.
Or the new Randall Graham is doing a
Tiburon
rosé
right?
for his new language of yes, which was pretty
Have
good.
You had it?
I tried it. Yeah, I tried it. I did. I tried it at a big tasting, and it was yummy. I don't remember which tasting it was, but it was very good.
I look forward to trying that. I love this Dianthus. I mean, it's such a fun, versatile food wine. Like as Chelsea was saying, I mean, it's big enough to hold up to some barbecue quail type stuff and that kind of fare, but can go with lighter stuff too. It's one of the most versatile food wines I think out there. It can do just about anything in my opinion.
I mean, Jeff was talking about, he was a little bit nervous about doing crispy and fried things with the pairing, but I mean, fried chicken in this rosé is honestly one of the like pinnacle pairings.
I was just thinking that Jeffrey does a Nashville spicy fried chicken sandwich, which I think you've had, and this would be just fantastic with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the pairing that the quail that you mentioned, that was, again, for me, I think of like what was for me the great pairing that I've done at a wine dinner with the Dianthus, and it was a spice rubbed grilled quail paired with a salted watermelon and feta salad, and it was ridiculously good. But I'm jealous of Chelsea's fried chicken.
Now, fried chicken is pretty versatile, like rosé.
Chris asked a follow-up question, I think, to our Tiburon answer. The do we have any new interesting varietals coming up soon? We've got some grapes that we just started in 2019. So we've got Vacarez and Sanso is new still, and Blanc. Those three just debuted in 2019, and we've got, what do we have? Do we have a full barrel of Muscardin in the cellar from 2022, or is it only a half a barrel?
Still 30 gallons.
No, it's not enough, but yeah, it's coming. And I think it's fun to note that having just done the white blending, I think all of the whites of Chateauneuf made it in there this time, correct?
Yep.
So that's pretty exciting from my standpoint. That's what you would want to happen, and it's always gratifying when it does happen, when everything is good enough to make the blend and make the blend the best it can be.
I feel like the Muscardin does feel new, though, Jason. You've been working on a project recently, right?
Yeah. So we included Muscardin in 2021 for the first time in the Le Complice blend, and I didn't realize until we went to go and get that label approved, because it was supposed to be bottled in April, that no one had ever bothered to get it approved at the TTB. So it was not, as far as the U.S. government was concerned, a real grape. My dad sent, I think, 7 grapes through that process, including in the last round Blanc and Vacarez and Terre Noir and Picardin. And I had just had it in my head that he'd completed the list, but he didn't. We didn't have Muscardin yet, and so he didn't bother to do the petition on that. So the petition is complete and sent in. I heard back from the TTB that they had received it and were looking forward to reviewing it, and hopefully we get news in time to bottle it. That wine's not supposed to be released until a year from now, in whatever, next spring 2024 is Wine Club shipment. So it's not a huge hurry on our end. But it does feel very new because of that. It's if anybody's interested in the process, I wrote a blog about putting together that petition. That if you're interested in, check it out.
Yeah, it was super cool because I got to see all the pieces that you put together in your packet, and just reading information on Muscardin, like things that, it's still new to us, and hearing the historic tasting notes from this is like, oh, this is pretty much exactly our experience. It was really cool. So highly recommend the blog read.
It was a very extensive petition. I looked up everything there was to read about Muscardin, and I think it ended up being about 12 pages, like not really all that much.
It's gonna turn out to be probably the most challenging one we've brought in, though. I think I was in quarantine for 13 years, and then the propagation blocks at the university got virused, and it's been hard to get that thing in the ground and going.
Yeah, it really has. It's had a journey to get to where it is.
For such an obscure grape, not many wines in the world have both Terre Noir and Muscardin in them, I believe.
That wine and Beaucastel, probably.
That wine and Beaucastel.
Cool. So, this Dianthus is from 2022. Chelsea, you talked a little bit about 2021, that it was this vintage where everything came in when it was supposed to, and the weather was benign, and 2022 was just the same, right?
2022. If 2021 was metered and balanced, 2022 was its hellraiser of a counterpart. It was frantic and exhausting and immediate.
I think Aaron's quote is the quote of 22, right?
What was that?
Yeah, which we haven't had an intern coming to work with us, and yes. Chelsea and I had been talking to her and telling her, we're not like a lot of the wineries. We take it pretty slowly, and we don't work crazy hours, and it's pretty mellow here at Tablas Creek. You'll be fine. And she came in about 2 weeks into harvest, and 2 days in, she just looked at Chelsea and went, "Good Lord, you guys go hard." It was like the busiest week we'd ever had.
Oh my gosh. It was, I think there was a 3-week stretch where I saw Bodhi a cumulative of 5 hours. It was a long, frantic.
Bodhi is, Chelsea.
Or a short, frantic harvest, excuse me. Oh, Bodhi's my daughter. She goes to bed early, so take that with a grain of salt. But we ended up having a massive heat swing right at the beginning of harvest that absolutely, it didn't speed things up. Things had to come in immediately. Everything was, like I said, I think frantic is probably the best descriptor for that word. And it's a heartbreakingly low yield vintage. As Jason was talking about, we just didn't have enough white grapes to make the Cotes Tablas this year. So we had very, very little to work with. But honestly, I don't know what we would have done in the cellar if we had had a full normal vintage. We just wouldn't have space. Even as it was, with a very, very low yield, we were like, ferment it there. I don't have any tanks. Like, just put it somewhere and let it ferment. Things were coming in and we didn't have space. So it was just one of those years that was definitely one to remember, that I would like to forget, actually. But
I forget which day it was. There's one day in particular that was just madness. And I think I got here really early in the morning, and by mid-morning, an entire parking lot was full of 2 stacked high bins, and it just kept coming. It was quite remarkable. Just watching the expressions on everybody's face as we tried to figure out, okay, how are we going to achieve this in one day?
This was one of those years for me, though, that made me, I don't think I ever for one second take for granted the team that I work with. But this was one of those vintages that really, really made you appreciate having such a solid core group of people around you that know what to do and are good at what they do and are level-headed and have a good positive attitude. That for me especially was, even in the dog days where we were just right in the thick of it and it was just so heavy and so hard, and you still have people walking by and giving you high fives. And it's just like that buoyancy of spirit and that teamwork, and we came out the other end of it all together and all intact, and we're all still here. So yeah.
And I think this is also a vintage where a winery's resources, particularly at the vineyard level, but cellar level too, are going to make a huge difference in the quality of the wine that they're able to make. One of the things that I was really grateful for as we were going through 2022 is that we have a full-time field crew who we give year-round employment to. And that's a piece of the regenerative organic certified work that we're doing. And there were neighboring wineries who could not get crews to pick during that 10-day heat wave at the beginning of September. And we heard stories of things like sugar levels shooting up, grapes turning to raisins, problems with fermentation because everybody's chemistry was out of balance. And we were able, it was a crazy push. We harvested a third of the year's harvest in 5 days. In a single week, we harvested what would normally take us 3 weeks. But we were able to do it. We were able to keep ahead of the vintage. That was one of my take homes from the blending trials that we did in just this week of the 2022 whites, is that it doesn't taste like a year where things got out of control in the vineyard. Things came in with good freshness. The varieties tasted varietally correct, but it will be a vintage that's worth being careful of. I think a winery's resources are going to show in 2022 in a way that maybe they don't always.
I think on top of that, even, Jason, I don't think it should be overlooked that even beyond our full-time vineyard crew, we treat people well and we pay people well, and the part-time field crews want to come work at Tablas Creek. So we're their first choice in a lot of times. So that makes a huge difference. The outside crews, if we call, they're wanting to come and work for us because we treat them well and respectfully and pay them more than really anyone in the neighborhood, I think, at this point. So I think that's an important part of this too.
For sure. Okay, so before we move on to the next wine, I think Ian has a slide of the back label of the Dianthus. I can't show it to you because, again, I don't have the bottle. It was poured out of keg. But one of the things that you'll see in all of our estate wines starting in 2021 are these twin certifications of Regenerative Organic Certified and California CCOF Certified Organic. I'm I'm super proud to share that, and we'll talk a little bit more about what goes into that in a couple of minutes. But,
Talking about proud.
yeah, yes, Gustavo,
Yeah.
our regenerative specialist,
Indeed.
does look awfully proud, doesn't he?
He is awfully proud.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, so let's do wine number 3, which is the 2021 Patelin de Tablas. This is we've been at the Patelin now a dozen years. We started in 2010 with Patelin Red and Patelin White. We added Patelin Rosé in 2012, and we really created this tier for a couple reasons. One, we felt like the category that we were a part of needed more introductions, particularly in quantities that could be sold by the glass, that would end up on a retail shelf in the $20, $25 range rather than the $35, $40 range. And so we created the Patelin wines, Patelin, which is French slang for neighborhood, by reaching out to a handful of the growers in our neighborhood, most of whom had our cuttings in the ground, and it's grown from there. I feel like this program is in a really good place. I think the 2021 versions of these wines are at least as good as any we've ever done. I don't know, but it's a different thing. Neil, can you talk a little bit about what it's like working with other vineyards versus working with our own vineyard, and what opportunities and challenges that offers?
Well, as you see on that label, there's a lot of vineyards that we work with, and it's not a revolving door. There's some that we have worked with the whole time, but there's definitely a lot of movement there. And for the most part, I enjoy working with the other growers. I think they are excited to have Tablas Creek reach out to them. And honestly, for me, at this moment in time, what it offers us is the ability to go out and persuade these guys to farm organically, regeneratively, whatever we can, certainly to take up organic practices. I think it offers an opportunity for Tablas Creek to have a reach into the farming community more and get people to farm like the world depends on it. And people are super receptive to that, and they like having us come to the vineyards. They like doing business with us for a number of reasons. We're fairly easy to work with. We like to pick early. We don't let grapes hang for a long time, which the growers hate because they lose the weight. So they like us because we like to make wines in our style, which is a little earlier picking, a little more finesse than a lot of people are doing. And it gives us a good reach out into the community, which I think is pretty important for us. And we've certainly built some great relationships through time. And you look at all these vineyards that we're buying from, Jason, and before Tablas Creek, there wasn't a whole lot of Rhone varieties planted in this area. So I think that's pretty exciting to see how much we've changed the picture of the area. I had a great discussion today with Jordan, my son, on an unrelated topic, but I was explaining you can't be swayed by what your sales team wants you to do because it's easier to sell. And I referenced your dad, and I remember the days when we first started, and all of the distributors and vineyard brands included were saying, you shouldn't do a blended wine. You should do Viognier and Syrah. That will sell. And your dad's sticking to his guns and saying, no, the blended wines are the future. This is what we want to do. And you look at the picture of Paso Robles now, I mean, this wine would have been impossible when your family bought this property. It would have never worked. So I think this is a great example of where we've moved our Patelin, that we can go out and source all these Rhone varieties from all these different vineyards in town. I think it's kind of a testament in many ways.
I love seeing that Glenrose vineyard on there. I mean, that was part of the very first Patelin vintage back in 2010. It's a relationship business. They were also, I believe, the first vineyard to buy vine cuttings from us plant them in 1996, the first year that we actually had any surplus vines to sell beyond what our nursery was producing for ourselves.
Yeah, Don Rose came in with the intention, his favorite wine was Hommage à Jacques Perrin. So he wanted to plant the varieties of Chateauneuf. And so by luck more than judgment, we showed up right when he bought his property. And talking about relationships, it was really cool today to see my son Jordan having lunch with Travis, who is now really the guy running the Glenrose. And I asked where Don was, and he said he sits in the house playing classical guitar, and that's about all he does now. But just to see those relationships evolve, next generations of people getting involved and still doing business together. And we did, our first real version of a Patelin type wine was the Glenrose, the Old Estates label in 2002, I think, was that.
Yep.
That was our first toe dip into this water. It was a little bit too soon, as we were talking about.
Yeah. We'll have more news about that coming up in this
in the fall. Did I steal the new news?
Yeah, you did. So there's a couple questions about how we get our Patelin vineyards. There's one from Dave, maybe to start with, which asks, are all of the Patelin vineyards West Paso? And no, they're not. There are things that we really love about other parts of Paso. I think it comes from 5 of the sub AVAs we got fruit from last year. Some of them out near us, like Adelaida and Willow Creek and Templeton Gap, but also a good amount of fruit from El Pomar and some really lovely Syrah from kind of the center of town, where it's a little sandier and the Syrah is not quite so meaty and savory, a little fruitier, a little more open. So no, they're not all West Paso.
That goes back to the it's so interesting and fun for us to see different sub appellations and what the fruit brings us. I think that's part of the intrigue for the cellar team, at least, of what we do. And rather than, it's great to be an estate winery in the truest sense of the word, where we're all contiguous in our estate, but it's also interesting to play with stuff from the other sub appellations too, to see what they have and what they bring to the table.
I think the biggest thing for me, we talk so much about being a terroir-driven winery, and we purchase this fruit from wineries. We've purchased fruit from wineries just a few miles down the road from us on Adelaida Road. And the fruit is something that we cannot replicate on our property. It's so vastly different in character, despite the fact that it's handled in much the same way when it hits the cellar door. I think for me, it's just an excellent showcase of what terroir is. And that's really fun for us in the cellar to work with things like that.
I love that comment from Debbie. That is exactly what we want. We want a wine that we're proud to have our name on, that a restaurant can pour by the glass, or that you can open on a Tuesday night and feel good about it. That's awesome. So Sybil asked how it worked with the other growers in 2022. So it's not like, we work with the growers throughout the year and throughout the growing season. And Jordy Lonborg, our viticulturist, is, as things get ripe, is in very close contact, making sure that we tell them when we want it picked and how we need it delivered. So it's not like it's showing up by surprise, but yeah, they were arriving at the same time as everything else was arriving. That was part of the challenge, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have no choice with the way we make our wines, and wanting to be at this really precise ripeness early in the game. When we're seeing a hot spell and the grapes are ready, they've got to come in and we've got to deal with it. That's simple as that. It's got to get done. And that was those few days when it's like, sorry guys, it's ready. We got to go. Let's make it happen.
And
Jordy was a sight to behold during that time, loading bins and the truck, and he was going crazy.
Typically in a harvest season, because we are purchasing from so many different locations, you have ripening levels and ripening seasons are slightly different. So where our peak ripeness might be in a 2 to 3 week span, it might be slightly shifted, prior or after at some other vineyard site. But in 2022, it was all bets off. Everything was hot and everything was ready all at once. So in most years, it does help to spread out a little bit because we are buying from different sites. But in 2022, there were no rules.
And then one question from Daniel, which I think is an important one, about asking whether all of the Patelin vineyards are regenerative organic. No, they are not. There are exactly 2 regenerative organic certified vineyards in Paso Robles right now. Us and the Maha estate at Via Creek. Like 2. That's it. There are, how many are there in California now? Like 15, maybe?
Yeah, not a lot.
Not a lot. So no, they are not all
Well,
regenerative organic, but and they're not even all organic at this point. But that's one of the, we did a sit down last year and decided that we needed to be using kind of our own platform, our own pulpit a little bit more. And so we made the commitment that within 5 years we would be sourcing the Patelin entirely from organically farmed vineyards. So that involves going out to our current growers and offering them both the incentive and the help to start farming organically. It involves, there are growers who are not willing to do that, so it involves also developing new relationships, working with vineyards that are willing to plant what we would like for us, and making a commitment to them over the longer term so that they have some security in doing that. But it's that's a commitment that we made last year that I'm excited about.
I think it's important to note, Jason, that you probably remember when we sat down and we're having this discussion, Jordy was very reticent to do that. He didn't think that it was going to be that easy. He wanted to start off with, we can just have them not use Roundup, and let's just start there. And he comes in so excited every time he goes to a vineyard and says that that's going to be our mandate. He went to a vineyard last week and he came into the lab and he was so excited, because Jordy does get excited, that he'd gone to this vineyard. And as he was leaving the property, the guy was on the phone calling CCOF to get the certification process started. And they've been so willing when we've gone to them, people saying, sure, but help us. What do we do? How do we manage this? And I think that's great to see. I mean, when you think, when we arrived, no one was farming organically, and now people are keen to do so.
Absolutely. I think that's been one of the most encouraging things I see on my drive out from where I live in Templeton out to the vineyard every day. I mean, 10 years ago, there wouldn't have been any organic vineyards that you were passing. And at this time of year, you would have seen those bare rows of dirt under all of the grapevine rows, where they would have been sprayed with Roundup or some other pre-emergent. And now you drive out and more than half the vineyards, at the very least, are not using Roundup. They're, you can see it's green from edge to edge. And that's such a lovely thing to see.
It is.
Okay.
Makes it all the more disappointing when you see the orange bands under the vines, though. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah. Or anybody, if you're driving around Paso Robles and you see a roadside that is bare of lovely green weeds at this time of year after this much rain, like, that's not natural. Doesn't just happen that way. So, okay, let's jump into the next wine, which is our 2010 Tannat. So Tannat. Sorry, 2020 Tannat. I used to make fun of my dad for doing this, for dropping decades. Where
make fun of
you're like,
so
oh,
much
the
of that.
1977. You're like, no, you're talking about 87. Now I'm doing it, which feels significant somehow. But
exactly the same thing with when I worked for John Munch. You would always get the decade wrong, and I'm just, come on, John, you're 10 years behind. Now I'm doing it as well.
Yeah. I'm trying not to connect it to the fact that I'll be 50 in a couple of months. So
Will you? Wow.
I will. Yep. I made it.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tannat, I should probably tell a little bit of the story of how we ended up with Tannat, because
It's a great story.
Anybody who is familiar with the grape will know that it is not a Rhone variety. It's not even kind of Rhone adjacent, like something like
Tiburon
or Vermentino, for that matter. Yeah. So when we worked out with the parents which grapes we wanted to start with, they turned that request over to the guy who runs the nursery that they had supplied with cuttings in Montpellier. So that meant that we could get the grapevines in from a nursery that had already done the hard work of cleaning up the grapevines. They wouldn't have virus. We'd be able to get them through the quarantine process easier. So that request went through, and we'd worked out 8 varieties that we were going to start with: Mourvedre, Grenache, Syrah, Cunoise, Roussanne, Marsanne, Viognier, Grenache Blanc. And 10 grapes showed up. The 8 that we had asked for, and 2 others, which were Vermentino and Tannat. And the first we knew about this is when we got a bill from the U.S. Department of Agriculture for the virus testing of Tannat and Vermentino. And I was there in Vermont when my dad called the USDA station and told them, like, you must have made a mistake. Like, these are not our grapes. Maybe you got the tags mixed up and we're being charged for somebody else's grape quarantines. And I didn't hear the other end of the response, but according to my dad, they basically said, like, we don't know what to tell you. They came all together. Take it up with the French. So
Good luck with that.
we called the parents and asked them if they had sent Tannat, and their response was, of course not. Why would we have sent Tannat? We don't grow Tannat. It's not a Chateauneuf variety. And it took months to track it down, but ultimately it turned out that this guy, the nursery manager in Montpellier, had decided on his own, without asking or telling us, that Tannat would be a great grape for Paso Robles, and he was going to send it. So we did a little research on our side and decided that maybe he had something right, that we should plant it. And we did. We planted half an acre in that first block, along with half an acre of Vermentino and another part of the property, and have liked it enough that we've planted 2 additional Tannat blocks. And it's become a real favorite here. So we do use it a little bit in one of our blends, in the Angoblé blend that is generally a fall wine club release. But the bulk of the Tannat that we grow goes into this 100% Tannat bottling. So with that as the background, Neil, Chelsea, what do you think of as Tannat? What does Tannat bring to the table?
Chelsea?
A little bit of everything, I would say.
A little bit?
A lot of everything. Actually, that's true. I feel like Tannat is like you have all of your dials and just crank them all up to 11 or 12 out of 10. Yeah, Tannat, we always talk about Tannat being where you just have kind of like the flavor and aroma wheel that everybody talks about for, like kind of deductive wine tastings. And you have all of these different possible things that you could be smelling or tasting. And basically Tannat just takes that wheel and just spins it. And so it's just like everything always in that glass. This, you get like that salted sweet cream butter. You get these candied violets. You get prime rib meat drippings. You get, like there is, it's everything that you could possibly imagine in a wine glass, and everything is packed in, and it's so over the top, but it's a balanced over the top somehow. Like if everything's turned up to 11, then it's all in balance, technically.
I love that comment you made about violets, because it really is. Tannat's like meat and earth and smoke and flowers. Like it's got a lot to it, but it has these lovely kind of high notes to it also that I think are what make it feel like it is in balance.
I think, so many people too, you drink a lot of the Uruguayan Tannats, and they do have this kind of rougher, hard edge, and you need to hold on to them. You need to give them time. You need to let them mellow out. But our Tannat, despite the fact that it is so much packed into every single glass, is incredibly approachable in its youth. This is a wine that I do love to hang on to, but it has some beautiful juiciness and kind of that like brambly spice in its youth. It's just so appealing. It's a fun wine to drink at any stage.
Awesome. I love that Bob Weir quote.
Yeah.
So
not much to add to that, really.
Steve's question of asking if that Tannat's the source of all or most of the Tannat grapes found on the Central Coast. I don't actually know the answer to that question. I know a decent chunk of it came from here. Do you know, Neil?
There was some Tannat, I think, up in Livermore before we brought it in. It was brought in a long, long time ago. But yes, the source of most of the Tannat locally is ours, I believe. Certainly, like the Glen Rose, and Tannat's one of the grapes that we were the only ones making for the longest time locally. And so, yeah, I would say that is the case. I'd like to answer a question a while back. David Clark asked what's in our cover crop. I know it's stepping back, but it's a worthwhile question to answer. We generally were with legumes and vetch and some oats, and we've been adding some large root radish type plants and a little mustard lately. The large roots to help break up the soil. The sheep have some compaction impact on the vineyard, so we've been adding some of the radish to try and naturally break the soils back up. You can see the cover crop there. We use a basic crop, which is called the Soil Max, which is vetch, oats, and peas, a few of each variety, and that's our base. But we keep adding and tweaking that as our farming changes little bit by little bit.
If you want to deep dive into that,
that is in fact Tannat in that picture. That's the first head train Tannat block on the property right there.
If you would like a deep dive into the cover crop, I did a series of explainers, little video explainers out in the vineyard, like last spring. So kind of a year ago. If you scroll back through our Instagram videos feed, you'll find that. It'll also give you a sense of what our cover crop will look like in about a month, kind of up to my like mid thigh, trying to tame that beast.
Yeah, it can get crazy. There's some stuff we've added over the years has been interesting. Like we added Ethiopian lettuce, which was a recommended thing for the sheep because they love it and it grows really well in it. And it also has a very big root. However, what we discovered in the head train blocks where we cannot get in with tractors, once the vines start really pushing, it just did not stop growing, and it grew all through summer and all through harvest, and there was nothing we could do about it. We couldn't, because you can't put the sheep in and you can't get a tractor in. So we've now restricted the Ethiopian lettuce to the vineyard rows that we can get into with a tractor if we need to.
Okay. In addition to talking about the Tannat, in between this and the next wine, I wanted to touch briefly on kind of our experience over the last week in blending the 2022 whites. This has another way of kind of thinking about what the 2022 vintage was like. Right, so you can see some of the samples on the left. You can see the blending table, all of us around the blending table on the right, feeling that we actually made wine successfully. What was that, Neil?
Is that Craig Ham almost smiling there on the right?
Yes, he looks like he's thinking about smiling.
That's a smile.
I don't know. I think he's smiling maybe a little more than you are in that picture.
Yeah, probably.
So, Chelsea, do you want to talk about what you feel like we've learned about the 2022 vintage through the lens of the whites that we saw this week?
Yeah, I mean, sitting down and taste. So just to give a little background, we basically set aside 2 weeks a year. So we just wrapped up our week where we looked at the white wines from the previous vintage. And then in mid to late April, we're going to sit down for a week with some of the pairings to look at the red wines from the 2022 vintage. And basically what we do is we set aside 1 to 2 days to taste through every single individual lot that we have in the cellar. So when harvest hits, we bring everything in separately. So we'll do multiple passes through individual blocks. So we'll have a few different picks from each of these individual blocks. And during this harvest season, we'll ferment everything separately, and then we'll age everything separately. So when it comes time to blending, we basically have all of these different pieces and parts that we have at our disposal to basically create the precise blends that we want to blend. With this year, it went fast. We only needed less than 1 day to taste through all of the individual lots for the 2022 whites. But I think what we lacked in quantity, we did make up for in quality. The wines are beautiful. They're pure and they're balanced. They're really, really pretty. I feel like everybody, we take turns kind of going through. We'll have 4 glasses in front of us, and everybody will taste on their own and take notes, and we rank everything from a 1 to a 3. So a 1 is going to be something that's elegant and refined and gorgeous, something that's going to be a Spree caliber. A 2 is going to be something that's friendly and it has nice acids, and it's nice to drink, but it doesn't have the gravity that we're looking for a 1. And a 3 is something typically that we need to bookmark to say it might be still fermenting, maybe it's a little reduced, maybe it's oxidized. It's just something that we need to address in the cellar later. And this is kind of how we start the blending process. So 1s will typically go into a Spree, and then we'll figure out where things land for the rest of the lots. With this vintage, so we'll taste about 4 glasses at a time, and everybody will take their notes to score, and then we'll talk about them. So everybody gets a chance to kind of discuss what they think is kind of showing to them in the glass. And I feel like the word pretty was thrown around a significant amount, especially considering how many men are at the table, which was lovely. And it's
Suggesting we're not pretty?
I didn't say that you weren't pretty. I just love that you think that that's a nice descriptor for a wine. I think these wines, they do have, when we were going through the harvest season, my initial impressions were we had slightly elevated pHs. So I thought that this wine was going to be a little bit richer than previous vintages. And it's surprisingly bright and energetic acids. Much more than I thought they were going to be, which was a lovely surprise, honestly. I think tasting through, a lot of people were just talking about it was just the purity of the fruit was exceptional. I'm really, really excited about the 2022 white wines that we have.
Something for people to realize, and that'll be the subject of my blog, which will get published on Monday also, but there will be a bunch of wines that we just aren't making in 2022. I was really pleased, like Chelsea, with what we tasted around that table, but it was off by almost 30% compared to 2021 and 55% less than we harvested in whites from 2020. So there are wines that we just won't make. We're not going to make a Cotes Tablas Blanc. We're not making a Roussanne. We're not making a Picpoul. We're not making Claret or Picardin. All of those are going into the Esprit. And then the Cote Blanc we sacrifice so that we would have enough varietal wines to be able to send out to club members and show in our tasting room. So
I think it's really important that we make it clear that we went into this blending knowing how much we had of everything and fully prepared not to make an Esprit this year. I mean, those wines are not in that wine because we needed them to make numbers. They're in that wine because that's what was the best thing for that wine. We were prepared not to do a Esprit for sure.
Yeah,
Didn't want to, but we're ready to do it if we had to.
Yep. Yeah, and that was absolutely on the table. That was one of the things that I was like, if you saw that picture, all of us smiling around the blending table, that was one of the main reasons why we were smiling, is that we got to the end of it and we're able to make an Esprit Blanc that we were really excited about and able to make several varietal wines that we were really excited about. But
I wasn't smiling because I was feeling bad for the coat.
Okay, great. Let's jump into the next wine, which is our Le Complice.
Le Complice.
Le Complice. So this is Le Complice 2020. It is Le Complice means kind of partner in crime, and we named it after the affinity that we felt Terre Noir and Syrah have. They're very different in looks. Syrah is very dark. Terre is very pale, but they both have this lovely herby spice to them. They both have good tannic grip. Syrah is low in acid, Terre is high in acid, so it sort of bolsters Syrah's tendency towards being maybe solid instead of exciting. And then we add a certain amount of Grenache to add this kind of mid-palate richness and lusciousness and generosity. So when Chelsea, what do you get in terms of flavors? How do you describe the Le Complice for people?
This, to me, I mean, you have all of the beauty and intensity of Syrah, where you have just that meaty power, but it's balanced with this really cool, like a lullaberry brightness and this great kind of crunchy green spice. I love kind of like that pop of green peppercorn, especially on the finish there. This wine is probably one of the most fun for us to make during harvest, because we get to play around with stem inclusion, which is not something that we really dabble in a lot for a lot of the other wines that we produce. But this particular wine, we kind of go off the rails a little bit and experiment and play. So this one, we do a lot of stem inclusion. So either whole cluster Syrah or adding a controlled amount of stems into fermenting Syrah lots. And we'll age it in the concrete eggs. You know, we do all kinds of really, really cool things with this wine, just to kind of, it's kind of our playground wine, I think. And then the fact that, you know, we're adding in Terre Noir to just kind of unknit some of the more opaque pieces of Syrah so that you can kind of see into the soul a little bit easier. And then Grenache to just kind of flesh out that mid palate, so it's not just so much hard-edged intensity. This is just a really, it's a cool wine for me. I love to drink this wine. I love to make this wine.
So we have a pairing coming up from Jeff. Neil, when you think of pairing food with this, how do you approach that?
I mean, before I go down that road, I always, you know this, I know, but I always think it's really important that we recognize that it was really your dad's. It was absolutely your dad's suggestion that we need to make a wine around Terre Noir. Your dad, of course, being the inspiration for everything that we do, but this was his last inspiration as a wine, that he wanted a wine built around Terre Noir. And as we always feared your dad's suggestions of names, he came in with this one, which I think we all thought was fantastic. And so, I mean, for me, if there's a great homage to your dad, and for me, in my memory, it's this wine. And like, it was his great ideas and his great naming that is the hallmark of this to me, and giving us in the Sarah license to, I want you to make a wine around Terre Noir. It's like, well, okay. And with a fist bump on the table when he said it. So as far as food, I mean, it's a kind of a grilled meats wine for me, for sure. You know, with grilled meats with thyme and rosemary, and I mean, I don't think it's a particularly rustic wine by any stretch, but that green spiciness, I mean, an herbaceousness in the nicest possible way, I would say. So that's where this leans to me. A great piece of venison on the grill with some rosemary and some thyme would dance beautifully with this, I think.
I love Gary's comment on the flavors here, getting some boysenberry above the green peppercorn. Like, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So here's the food that Jeff just gave me.
Look at that, Chelsea. Doesn't that look nice?
Trevor's gonna pull it out of the oven in a couple of hours. We're good.
He's ragoing in the background.
So it is a lamb braise with polenta. I think is Jeff ready to talk about how he came up with this pairing?
Yeah, generally.
I am. Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, good. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. First of all, I'd like to talk about the crispiness of the arancini you did. Hopefully, we can get some feedback on that. With the incredible balance of Tablas Creek white wines, I think that the crispiness of the arancini was really neat, and I'm excited to do it for 400 people for the Tablas Creek pickup dinner. My staff is not that excited about it.
There's people in your kitchen that are not so excited.
It'll be a busy kitchen next week. And so this next pairing was super important to me in several different ways. In that we use Tablas Creek lamb, and often we can say we use Tablas Creek lamb, but can we say that we use that 100% in the braise and in the way we use the liquid and the way we break it down? And that's the way we did it. Just sometimes you can just use water and a little bit of chicken stock, and the flavor of the terroir comes out, actually. Neil and I were talking the other day, and he was saying, well, I had heard the greatest thing about terroir is who owns it, which is funny. It's a funny comment. But actually, in cooking, it's really true. It's like, how do you own the way you cook? And so the way you own the way you cook is to say, okay, I am going to use just these ingredients in the way I braise and the way I prepare food. And so we've done that with this Tablas Creek lamb. And so served it with a polenta, and the polenta gratin, very simply done in water without chicken stock, and then finished with a little bit of cream and a little bit of polenta gratin. And I think that kind of shows the way this lamb can really represent the property. We did it overnight, and I think it's not easy to do for a lot of people, but if you take this product, put it into a pan, and just let it cook overnight, you're going to see the benefits and the quality and all the interesting herbaceous flavors that come out of the lamb from Tablas Creek that are the same as the herbaceous qualities of the wine. And so that's what we did. And you're going to see a lighter quality in it. So Jason and Neil, as you're tasting the braise, usually you've tasted my braise for what, 12 years you've tasted my food. Isn't it a bit lighter in flavor than you usually see? And that's because we haven't added additional veal stock and things to it.
It's super pretty. What cut of lamb was it?
And so, pardon me?
What cut of lamb did you use for this?
And so for this, we used the lamb shoulder, and then just finished it with a little bit of salsa verde, which is an Italian salsa verde with a little bit of mint to refresh the dish, and we see the flavors of the property coming out. Often I've cooked this lamb for you for many years, and you've always said to me, yes, but if you use veal stock or if you use beef stock, it just kind of tastes the same. This time I used nothing but a little bit of chicken stock and a little bit of water, and we see the flavor of Tablas Creek coming out, which is herbaceous and floral and fantastic. So
essentially it's taken you a dozen years to take my advice.
That is absolutely the complete truth. And it took me a while to consider it, quite honestly, because I wasn't sure that you were correct. But I did do that, and at first I felt like, is this a little light? Is it a little light? But it's not. It's actually a reflection of the land, isn't it?
I think it's exceptional.
And so off we go. And so not a reflection of the chef, but a reflection of what Tablas Creek lamb can do. And so trying to do more and more of that. But I wanted to say, and I don't think that everybody's going to pick up on this, but I think we got a reflection of lavender in that braise. There's so much lavender on this property. And it's been there, since day one, right? And I think we're feeling that in the lamb itself. We're looking forward to this pickup party that's going on next weekend, and I'm going to braise lamb in the same direction that I have. And honestly, I have usually used a heavy hand on it, but I'm really, really happy to use a lighter hand on it and to see what lamb can be. And then, it doesn't have to be a pairing with a heavy wine. It can be a pairing with the Cotes. Like people don't understand that. Like, oh no, I have to pair a certain way with a braised lamb. No, a braised lamb can be a medium pairing as well. And so that's really where I'm getting at. And you're seeing that salsa verde, which is a beautiful thing to highlight the lamb as well. I'm hoping, Jason, that you get that as well. And so that's really the direction we're going this spring on this really nice pairing.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that everybody realizes, but these are the same dishes that you're going to be serving to all of the guests who come to the pickup party, not this coming weekend, but the weekend after. So this is sort of a
Correct.
preview, because we haven't always done that. Sometimes it's been like standalone pairings for this event, and then separate things for the pickup party. So this is a single thing, which is I think really cool.
Yeah, it is a single thing, and it represents the property. It represents everybody coming to it, and it's the kind of thing that I can do for a lot of people as well. But like both Neil and you had pointed, it's also something that is so representative of the property and so representative of spring in Paso Robles. And so red wine and spring in Paso Robles, this is the dish. It's really nice.
I love it. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeff. So
My
people
pleasure.
who want to learn more about you and what you do, what's the best way for them to learn that?
Yeah, chefjeffreyscott.com, and I'll be on there, and get a hold of me and see what kind of culinary nonsense I'm up to. And most of the time, I'm hanging out with you and Neil, and we're just figuring it all out. So it is always my pleasure. I love you both so much.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll see you in a week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we jump into the Panoply, I wanted to share some exciting news that we just got. We found out that we are the honoree for a green medal for environmental leadership from the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance, which, like, for us, this is sort of as high an honor as you get in California wine. They give 4 of these out each year. One for community, one for business, one for leadership, and one for environment. So for us to get the Environment Award is so significant and meaningful for us. Neil, you've sort of driven our whole transition from organic when we started to biodynamic, and more recently to regenerative organic. Are there pieces of the work that we're doing that you feel it's particularly important to highlight?
I mean, I think it's all important that we recognize that not we, but you and the Perens and the Haas families came here with the intent to farm organically. I came onto the scene and was tasked with doing that, and it was not easy because I was not a farmer at that point in time. I was enthusiastic, which is about all I had, but there was no one else locally farming organically. So there was so little resources at that time. It was swimming upstream for sure. I mean, there was organics going on in other industries in other areas, but not here in Paso Robles. And it's, it goes back to Jacques Grand, the father of Jean-Pierre and Francois, who was decided to farm organically, I think late 50s, early 60s, going completely against the grain. And I think it was just the right choice. And I think it was fantastic that we did it. It was really, really was hard work to get it done in the beginning. And I think, and I'm correct me, Jason, on the dates, but 2003, we got the vineyard certified as organic, which was a huge step for us, and something that at that moment we're ferociously proud of. But to continue trying to farm and trying to care for the land in the best way we possibly can, and continuing to do it, keeping on doing that, keeping researching, led us to biodynamics, which, whatever you think of that style of farming, the heart and the soul of that theory is incredible, as treating your farm as an organism, as a single organism, and not bringing outside inputs in, and bringing livestock and diversity. And anyone that knows the land and knows farming knows that that's a great thing if you can do it. So we went down that road, and that was, your dad and I went up to Gurgich and visited them, and as always with your dad on the way back, I was umming and eyeing, and he just said, "No, we're going. This is what we're doing. We're gonna go biodynamically farming. We'll start small and we'll expand." And we implemented that. And I believe it was 2011 when we certified as biodynamic, which was not easy, but we've done it. And now we have Gustavo, who really runs that program with such a passion. That's really, really important. To farm that way takes a lot of passion, a lot of care and attention. And Gustavo is fantastic for that and keeps us driven. But that's not to stop. And the goal has never been to see how many certifications we can accumulate. The goal has always been to try and find what is the best way to farm this specific piece of land in the best possible way, to leave it in the best possible condition for the next generations. I mean, Tablas Creek was never built to make it and sell it. Tablas Creek was built to be multi-generational. And the simple goal for me is to leave this land hopefully better than I took it on for your kids and the next generation. So that led us, of course, to the ROC, the regenerative farming, and to be the first certified ROC vineyard in the world, not in Paso Robles, in the world. I take an immense amount of pride in that, and I think we all do here. And it's just another step. I mean, it's a certification, and that's important, but it's another step into trying to understand how to work with the environment and leave everything in a better state than we found it, or at least in a comparable state. But for us, the end goal is to create wines that are reflections of this very specific and very unique piece of land. So the least that we can do, the least that we can alter, the least that we can input, the better. And that's kind of where we've gone. And the ROC is incredible. And we've now, you showed the bottle earlier, and now we've achieved the gold level, which is the highest level of their certification program, which the decisions you have made and we that a company have made are incredible and a source of so much pride for me. But it's not over. You know, we still haven't figured out how to do this. You know, we'll keep going. And we'll try and make it better. That's my thoughts. Done, as they say in the Haas family.
Lovely. No, I mean, it's one of the things I think that it's important for people to realize is I think sometimes there's this idea that you're sort of making a compromise between making the best wine that you can or farming in a way that is as low impact and high positive, low negative impact and high positive impact as you can possibly do. And the thing that I really love about this pursuit of biodynamics and now regenerative organics is that all of these decisions that are leaving the land in better shape are making better wine. It's making healthier soils. It's making grapevines that will live longer. Hopefully that's a higher percentage of old vines in the wines. It's making vines with deeper root systems, reducing our reliance on outside inputs like groundwater and non-renewable energy. And all of these things, yes, they're making us more sustainable, but they're also all of the things that we should be doing to make wines with as much character and as much character of place as we possibly can. So it's not a compromise. It's a win-win. And I'm proud to have helped make this happen. And really proud of that.
That's really a valuable point. I mean, my task from the families when I started was to make wines that are an expression of place. That is my main goal in my working life. And it is a constant back and forth with our shepherds and who are doing the grazing out there. Is yes, this is really important, but we can never lose sight of the fact of what we're trying to do. At the end of the day, we are trying to make a great bottle of wine. So you tend to deal with the regenerative world and they're looking at pasture land and how do we make the pasture better? We're not growing pasture, we're growing grapes. So we have to balance those two and make them work in synergy with each other. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And it's great. It's an incredible thing to be part of.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about the Panoply. It's wine number 6. So the Panoply is modeled after the Beaucastel Hommage à Jacques Perrin, which is the wine that they make out of the best, really always heavily based on Mourvedre, out of the best Mourvedre lots in the vineyard at Beaucastel. And in honor of Jacques, who was the one who set Beaucastel kind of on the path that it's on now, transitioning to organic farming, like Neil said earlier, but also going out and finding all of the full collection of grapes that were used in the Chateauneuf area before phylloxera, planting them at Beaucastel, building that full collection. And really it's his work which allows us to do what we're doing today. So this is sort of our homage at the Hommage à Jacques Perrin. So it's always based on Mourvedre, decent chunks of Syrah and Grenache, though the relative percentages of Syrah and Grenache can vary from year to year. Chelsea, do you want to talk about what signifies a Panoply lot to you as we're doing our blending trials? How do you know that when something is like that good?
So when we're going through during the blending session and sitting around our blending table, there are specific lots that really just jump out of the glass. These are the wines that have opulence and richness, and they're just exceptional. During a blending, there's only going to be a handful of them. And it's one of those wines that you mark with a 1+ or a 1 star. And it's usually a pretty unanimous vote. I mean, it's a wine that will stop everybody in their tracks. We're like, I just need a moment with this wine. Let's just sit here with this for a moment. And for a Panoply lot, it doesn't need to be the entire lot. Sometimes it'll just be a barrel select. So say if we have a barrel lot that's 12 barrels, we might pick 2 of them that go into Panoply. Only the most exceptional of that entire lot will go in. So these are wines that are just basically, they're not the biggest, but they are the most elegant. They are the most beautiful. They are the most opulent. So it's not necessarily a power thing that we're going for. It's just the wine that just has this ethereal quality that just kind of transcends everything else. As we're sitting around that blending table, this is just something that rises above. So those are the lots that go into Panoply.
And then what happens? Like, so we choose those lots. What happens after that?
Yeah, so after we choose them, Panoply is going to be, basically we kind of start from the upper echelon blends and work our way down. So Panoply and Esprit are going to be blended first. So Panoply is the first decision that we'll make during the blending process. And essentially we'll come up with 3 potential blends. So we taste everything blind. So we'll come up with 3 blends and we'll taste them blind around the table, and everybody rates those blends on a 1 to 3. So 1 is going to be your favorite blend. And we have a lot of personalities that sit around the blending table. So there's a lot of, big opinions, and everybody has a different palate, which is fantastic. This is, I think, as Jason always calls it, he calls it the process. So we kind of need to reach this unanimous decision talking about this is going to be the best wine as long as everybody agrees on this blend. So basically we taste these options blind and vote and decide this is, say blend number 2 is the one. And this is the Panoply, as I mentioned, it's not going to be the biggest. It's going to be something that has this great ageability. This is something that we want for long-term cellaring. And we want this, for me especially, Panoply is something that is made to mark a special occasion. This is kind of like the punctuation on somebody's dinner table when they're celebrating something, or maybe this is the reason that you're celebrating is because you're opening a Panoply, which sometimes is the case in our house. We're like, we're going to turn this into an event because we're opening a bottle of Panoply. So I think for me, that's kind of what I have in the back of my head when you're choosing these lots. Is this something that's going to be worthy of somebody's marked occasion?
Lovely. Super. This is still a baby. That's a Bev's comment is absolutely right. It's showing really nicely right now. I feel like 2020 was a pretty luscious vintage. So some of these wines that are sometimes very structured and really need a few years, like this will be wonderful in a few years, but it's not like it's difficult now. It's beautiful and delicious now. I remember my dad always used to say, like, time doesn't make a wine that wasn't good in the first place good. Like, it's going to change it, but you want to know a wine that is a great wine should be great at any stage that you open it.
This is tasting pretty great to me.
It's beautiful.
Oh, fun question from Betsy. What's the code of the different color leaves on our bottles? So in this kit, so you have gold leaf, which is basically our Esprit and Panoply, just the very best wines that we make get that gold leaf on the label and also the logo bottle. All of our other estate wines get silver leaf. So it's basically the next tier down, but these are all of our estate wines. So that's Le Complice and Angoblet, our varietal wines. And then the Patelin wines have bronze, and these are non-estate wines, get the bronze leaf. And then the rosés have kind of a rosé colored, kind of a rose colored foil.
Coppery.
Copper rose color. And again, I don't have a bottle of that because I didn't get it out of a bottle. I got it out of a keg, and I'm going to talk about that next. But it is not at all a newbie question. It's a great question. Thank you for asking. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up next for us at Tablas Creek. Those of you who joined us in the fall heard us talk about the different ways that we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint, looking at things like sourcing lighter weight bottles and better sourcing of cardboard. Chelsea talked about that when you wouldn't think that would be exciting, but it was super exciting. Hearing about better sources, lighter weight sources of cardboard, learning that if you don't coat that cardboard, it saves a huge amount of inputs, but it also makes it more recyclable. We've also been working with things like wine in a box. Many of you saw the release of our Patelin de Tablas Blanc in the 3-liter boxes that we did. That's the 21. We just released the 22, which sold out in 3 weeks or something. And again, people dismiss boxes because they often have not very good wine in them. But as a package itself, it offers a lot of appeal in terms of how long it stays good once it's open. And the fact that it doesn't have a lot of extra weight in terms of all of that glass, it reduces the carbon footprint of the package by 84%. So anyway, we're looking at different ways of doing that. But one of the things that I'm really excited about that we just started this year, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, is we have started bottling. I guess bottling is not the right word. At bottling each time, we have started kegging up the amount of wine that we think that we're going to need to pour as samples in our tasting room. And now if you come to the tasting room, you're going to get at least the things that would have gone into bottle this year. Instead of having them come out of bottle, they're coming out of tap. So these are kegs that we've filled in the cellar. It means that we have zero waste. I feel like there is no bottle which is more useless than one that never actually has to leave the cellar. So if you're just putting your wine in bottle and sitting it in a different part of your cellar and then bringing it to your tasting room and opening it for someone, that's a lot of wasted packaging that you really don't need. And serving wine out of kegs is something we've done for restaurants for the last decade. And it's great for the wine and it's great for the footprint. So we will be hopefully saving something like 10,000 bottles this year from not putting those tasting room samples in bottle and instead doing them in keg. And we believe that it'll also mean that the wines that you'll get when you come to visit us are going to be in pristine shape. That's one thing. Second thing that's coming up is we're getting back on the road a little more often. I actually have a trip to Chicago coming up next week. It's my first out-of-state trip this year. Our national sales manager, Darren Delmore, has been on the road a lot over the last few weeks. We are doing events around California and around the country. Check out the website if you want to see what some of those are. But we're also continuing these sorts of virtual and on-demand events. I've been doing every other week. I do an Instagram live conversation with somebody I think is doing cool stuff in the world of food or wine or the environment. I've had guests like Karen McNeil and MJ Towler on in recent weeks. I'm going to be having some really cool guests coming up. So we've got Jess Lander, who's in the bottom left in that picture, who's the new writer for the San Francisco Chronicle. We've got Randall Graham, who we mentioned already at least once in this, the iconic founder of Bonnie Doon, and still doing fascinating stuff for a couple projects he's involved in. So join us on Wednesdays. Every other Wednesday, I do those. And then we're going to be continuing to do things like this. We'll do a virtual pickup party in the fall. We'll do a virtual en primeur tasting when we get to December. And try to create a balance of coming to you where you are, giving you fun things to do if you come to us, and then certain things that like this you can access from anywhere. So I don't know, Neil, what are you looking forward to in your world over the next few months?
I just getting back in the vineyard and actually being able to get back in the vineyard, and just excited to see the impacts of this rain and the vineyard see some health and all of the stuff we've been doing over the last years with the sheep, with composting, et cetera, watching all of the rain bring that to the roots of the vineyard and see what that brings. And another harvest. I mean, I honestly never get tired of harvest until harvest. I'll be tired of harvest when we're about a month in maybe, but it remains curiously a really exciting and a great, attractive time for me. I love it so much with all the smells and excitement and the view of what's coming for the next year. So a bit boring, but I always look forward to the same things, the vineyard and the harvest and the excitement that brings.
Well, that's good because that happens every year. So it's good to be excited about the things that happen every year.
We should be grateful that it happens every year. If it hadn't rained, it might not have happened this year. So, yeah.
How about you, Chelsea? What are you looking forward to in your world?
Well, we've got a couple Perrins coming to visit in a couple weeks here. And it's always such a treat to have them sitting around the blending table. But to have a handful of them is going to be a real experience. And
what do you call it? Group of Perrins? They're the gaggle?
I think it's something much more serious than a gaggle.
A panoply?
It might be a panoply.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really, really great week, and I'm really looking forward to it. And also, I mean, as Neil said, I'm excited for the vineyard. Just driving around Paso Robles right now, I feel like every few miles I want to look for a turnout to take pictures, because just the most mundane areas are so exceptionally beautiful right now. I'm excited to just be alive here. I mean, if anybody is thinking about taking a trip out to Paso Robles and it's kind of been on your radar, do it this year. It's going to be absolutely magic.
Yeah, the next few months are going to be off the hook. Wildflower season should be something to behold.
Incredible, yeah.
Well, outstanding. Well, that's the program for this evening. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of it. Thank you, all of you Wine Club members out there. We're continuously humbled and inspired by your interest and by your support and by your questions. We couldn't do this without you, and it wouldn't be a whole lot of fun. It would be an awful lot of wine to drink for ourselves. So thank you for being a part of the Tablas Creek family. Thank you for participating in tonight's event. Thank you, Neil and Chelsea, for taking a chunk of your Friday evening to join me. And thanks, Ian, behind the scenes for making this all work. So
yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend. Cheers.
that great vast Atlantic. And before you did go, oh, I promised you that I'd hold you and beg you not to do so. But I let you go. Set your sails up and prayed the winds to blow. I like to pretend that I'm a merciful siren. Look out for the rock that I'm singing upon. Well, I'll mend your ship the very day that you wreck it. Though it may take some time, oh, to get to know this old shipwright, then I will be